I am really excited. We're going to continue in our series, 10 Commandments. If you're not there yet, we're going to be in Exodus 20. We're moving on to what I think should be a crowd favorite commandment. If it's not, check your heart, because this one rocks. We are talking today about rest. We're talking about Sabbath. Sabbath is... if you've never looked at it, if you don't know what it is, if you've heard about it, and you've heard, I've heard all sorts of things about Sabbath, from, it doesn't really apply to Christians today, to, it's a good idea, it's just, I just don't really know if it's worth it. I've heard, we all hear different opinions, some good, some terrible. So we're going to start. I want to break down. I'm going to talk a little bit about, what I think to be the example that's laid out. Personally, I feel like commandment number 4, the command of Sabbath rest, ties us to God. It ties us to one another. And it truly, truly is something that we need to put in practice today. So, starting Exodus chapter 20, we're going to start in verse 8. It'll be up on the screens. If you don't have a Bible and you love the paper Bible in front of you, unless you're in the front row, you should have one in front of you. It's a little black book. It says Bible on it. You can peel that thing open. Mine's on page 73. Good luck. So, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant, or your female servant, or your livestock, the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven, the earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he made it holy. That's a good word. 6 days you can labor. That one day you have to take it off. That's God ordained. Praise the Lord. I'm into that sort of thing. I grew up, I've been able, when I come up, I get to share a little bit about how I grew up. And if you know my parents, you know that they are two individuals, they're kind of old school. And I can see my mom shrinking, oh no. But my parents are old school, and I'm lucky enough to get to see them. My dad had this adage growing up, and my friends who I grew up with already know what it is, but my dad had this adage because we heat our house with wood. A strong back is a terrible thing to waste. And my parents had 3 young men, 1, 2, 3, 2 older brothers, plus all our friends. So my parents knew, yeah, you can have all your friends over. No problem. 7 a.m. comes by. All right, boys, time to work. But my parents set a very, very clear distinction for us growing up. One that I wasn't always thankful for, admittedly, but one that was absolutely true in our house, and it was church on Sunday. Now, there's a few exceptions, I'm sure. They probably remember more than I do between sports games or, flu season or whatever it was, but church was on Sunday. And I remember after church when I was really young, we used to walk back from the one we were going to, and my dad would make pancakes. And man, I don't think they planned it, or maybe they did, and I just don't give them the credit they deserve. I don't think they planned it, but Sunday to me, that was pancake day. And they let us do the syrup thing, it was no holds barred. Just let them go. The table's going to be sticky. They're going to be sticky. Hose them off later. It's going to be fine. But Sabbath and Sunday was so sweet. For more than just what it was in a day for our family, but because they put in my mind, I'm thinking about pancakes right now, and I'm yeah, I love it. Sabbath was sweet. When we look at Sabbath in the ancient Near East, that's what it's called. The ancient Near East, not the ancient Far East, the ancient Near East, like Israel, Jerusalem, those areas. When we look at Sabbath for Jews, it was more than just a day to sit. Sitting and resting is part of it. You may not know, there's a ton of things you can't do on Sabbath as a Jew at the time. So I'm leaning, this is okay, but I can't walk too far. 3 miles is about my limit to walk. On Sabbath, you weren't to prepare your meals. You pre-prepare those the night before, which is kind of a convenient thing. I think we all like a crock pot meal. We're coming into crock pot season, one of my favorite times of year. And so you like pre-prepare your meals. There's a ceremonial washing before your first night of Sabbath. In the Jewish calendar, days ran from evening to evening, not so much morning to morning, where we kind of think about it like, oh, yesterday was Saturday. They just had like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, Sabbath. So Sabbath started on what we would, I guess, consider Friday night. And you'd start with a ceremonial cleansing. You'd wash your hands. You'd wash your face. You'd put on specific Sabbath clothing. It wasn't meant to be just another day. It was a special day. It was a day designated to restoration, to remembering what God had done. In Deuteronomy, it said, remember the Sabbath day and remember how I took you out of Egypt. Remember how I pulled you from Egypt and the freedom I gave you. Even wandering in the wilderness, the Israelites took Sabbath day. And that's pretty impressive. See, Sabbath, I think unfortunately, we see it and it's oversimplified as go to church and I guess we're not supposed to work. But it was so much more than that. We're going to put Isaiah 58 up here if you want. It's Isaiah 58, 13 and 14. And it paints a better picture, I think. But Sabbath day was a celebration. It was a time of feasting. It was a time of joy. It was a time of coming together and celebrating what the Lord has done. In Isaiah 58, it says, if you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day. That word pleasure, some biblical interpreters also put it as business. From doing your business on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Lord honorable. If you honor it in not going your own ways or seeking your own pleasure or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. See, it's a celebration. It says, you shall take delight in the Lord. I think it's significant that Sabbath is referred to as more than just a standing rule that we don't work. Originally, I don't think Sabbath was just a day not to work. It was a day to celebrate what God had done and take delight in it. That has implications today. Now, I'm not one who wants to tell you have to take Sabbath on Sunday. I recognize that doesn't work for everybody. If I were to take that approach, I'm a hypocrite. I currently, I'm bivocational. If you're not familiar with the word, it means I work a job outside of church. So I get to, because I truly do enjoy my job. I get to work in one of our local ERs. I actually work in 2 local ERs. I'm an EMT outside of the church, and I work in the ER, so I'm an ER tech. You may not know this. Hospitals don't close on the weekend. I know. You may be surprised, and if you're surprised, I'm glad, because that means you probably haven't been to a hospital on the weekend. Great. I love seeing you at this job. I don't really want to see you at my other job. Okay? Unless you have cookies. We will. That's fine. Anyway, so I can't tell you, like, hey, Sabbath is definitely on Sunday, because I have to go to work tonight. So it's going to be real weird if I make that claim. So I'm not going to make that claim. But what I am going to say, it needs to be a priority in your life, in parents, husbands, wives. It needs to be a priority in your family's rhythm to take a day, to take a step back, to recognize there needs to be a priority on honoring the way God designed and built the world. If you're there, it's Genesis 1. We're all over the Bible today. I know it's like church, but in Genesis 1, as we move into Genesis 2, we see the author lay out something that I think is super, super significant. I'm going to start in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, and go into chapter 2 a little bit. But it says, And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning on the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. I find it very interesting that before we see the command to be fruitful and multiply or to worship and obey, we see God set a precedent for his creation to rest, to appreciate what he had made, to hang out, right? God formed a place for Adam and Eve, and he did more than say, okay, great, I'm going to take a step back. I know if you own your own business, you may know this more than those of us who work for the people who own businesses. If your boss isn't working, sometimes we have to work, right? But I'm just going to go ahead and make this assumption about God. In the garden, if God wasn't working, I'm assuming he's not going to make Adam and Eve work. I think that first day of creation was filled with joy, was filled with just wonder, was probably filled with a little bit of confusion, like platypuses come up, that's got to be a weird one. Adam sees that, like, okay, what's this one? Mammal with a bill. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it has fangs. Don't worry. But that first day wasn't dedicated to work. The first obligation God gave mankind was to rest with him, to be with him in community, to hang out. It's a pretty impressive precedent because I think when we look at Exodus and we look at these 10 commandments, 9 of them, if I didn't do, you all would probably ask Kevin, why is Everett a pastor? But if I do neglect the Sabbath day, it may put me up for a raise. Isn't that weird? Like if Kevin works 7 days a week, if Pastor Kevin works 7 days a week as a pastor, I don't know if we would notice. Kim would definitely notice. But we may be like, man, Kevin's doing an amazing job. Guys, we got to promote him somehow. I don't know what to do with that. But we got to treat, like, it's amazing if we didn't do some of these commandments, like, the expectation is you shall not murder. But if we don't take a Sabbath, who's going to call you on it? Your boss might give you a promotion. It's weird. I think that's why it says remember the Sabbath day. I think the reason we're liable to forget it is because it feels detached from normal culture. You may or may not feel this way. I think there are times that in our culture, we are obsessed with productivity. And we're so focused on looking at what we produce defines who we are. And when I say that, I mean, as parents, I think I've seen the idealism of my child becoming incredible, becoming a collegiate athlete, or getting all straight A's, so let's get them into more classes, or let's fill up their schedules because they love this so much, and then they're so busy, and look how great they're doing, and that's valuable. That's good, but I don't know if it's right. And that was the distinction that I came to from a book Kevin mentioned to us in staff yesterday, that there's good choices, but good choices aren't always the right choice. And although it may be good to feel productive all the time, that doesn't mean it's right. So why not Sabbath? Kind of feels unproductive, right? Like, hey, take a day off. Everybody likes to hear that, right? If I said, hey, take a day off, everybody's like, okay, right? Anybody have a problem if I said take a day off? Any have a problem if your boss is like, no, just take the day, you're good? Nobody's going to fight me? Yeah, I agree. But in culture today, it's hard to feel like free to do that. We have emails going off. The mini computers in our pocket, our phone, they have email, Facebook, Instagram, maybe Snapchat, and you may feel obligated to check those things. Email especially. I know I sometimes feel very obligated to check email, so I've just turned the email notification off. which is great for me because it allows me to rest. I don't think everybody likes that. I think this idea of rest is something society doesn't like. I think people expect us not to take a break. And the cultural expectation is that we stay busy. You ever ask somebody, hey, how you doing? And the answer is always, busy. Busy, busy, busy. And you're like, wow, what are you up to? And she's everything. It's like a weird competition we have with each other. Like, you ever talk to someone, you're like, hey, how you doing? We're busy. Oh, you think you're busy? Like, I talk to some of my friends who have kids now. I'm like, how are you guys? And they're like, busy. And then their child goes screaming by, and I'm like, oh. But it's like, sometimes you're at work, like, hey, how are you? You have a good weekend? It was busy. And they're like, yeah, it was busy. We had 14 soccer games and only 2 kids. It's like, what? How'd you do that? Yeah, Saturday turned into a 28-hour day. Don't know. Time machine works. It's like, what? But like, we're so proud of this fact that we're busy. Or you ask somebody, like, I'm tired. God, I'm tired. Who's tired? Anybody? Yeah, you ever ask them, like, are you tired? And they're like, yeah, I only slept 12 hours last month. And it's like this weird thing we're proud of. But how amazing would it be if you talk to somebody and you're like, hey, how are you? And they're like, you know what? I'm fantastic. I'm really good. Why? Well, because I've developed in our home and our family, we take a day off. And we don't work. Like, that'd be weird, right? That'd be weird. If I asked, hey, what'd you do yesterday? And they're like, oh, totally detached. We just hung out at the house. Some people are like, that sounds amazing. Other people, if you're more extroverted like me, you're like, that sounds kind of boring. Okay. But man, how great would it be if you stopped answering, how are you, with tired? How great would it be if you set aside a day, and this is going to sound crazy, every week, not just when it's convenient? I was doing some reading. There's a book by a gentleman named Matthew Sleeth. It's called 24/6, and in it he did the rough math of how much time you save. And he said over a 55-year period, somebody can check me on this if you want to. I might be butchering it, but over a 55-year period, if you take 24 hours off every week throughout those years, you end up saving yourself like 6 months of time. Who wants 6 months of time back? Who wants 6 months of rest back? I know, I wish we could put it all together too. That'd be great. Everybody's like, man, 6 months sounds sweet. But that's not the rhythm. See, the purpose of Sabbath is to come and join with each other in community with Christ. It's a time for healing. It's a time for restoration. It gives us the opportunity to follow the example set before us and recognize God's heart for us, to enjoy what he's made, the blessings he's put in front of us, as well as to do good things. When we look at what Jesus did on the Sabbath, most of the time Jesus got in trouble. It's because he did something wrong on the Sabbath, right? Just some spitball miracles on the Sabbath. A person with a crippled hand healed on the Sabbath. How dare you, Jesus? How dare you bring redemption and restoration on the Sabbath? A person who is blind. People were fed. He let his disciples pick grain. I know, scandalized. But these were all things that were prohibited. And yet Jesus recognized that Sabbath was made for mankind. Mankind wasn't made for Sabbath. And we had set rules up, and they had such a distorted view on what the purpose of Sabbath was, that they had fallen away from the original intent, which was community with each other and community with God, to remember the good things he had done. So how do we Sabbath now? How do you take the schedules we have? How do I take a 2-week rotation schedule where every other weekend I work Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, and how do I build it into my daily life? How is that applicable? How do my parents with 3 kids who are all in sports make it work? Balance. Parents, I'm not saying it's easy. My wife and I do not have children, so I don't get it, really. But I can tell you this, if you don't make these things priority, they won't either. If we claim that church is a priority, but we treat it as such only when the weather's not too nice, or when the game's not too good, or it's not that inconvenient, then that's what they see. And if we let soccer games and football games, feeling a little tired or a little just, I don't know, apathetic, if we let that win from what we claim is the priority, we're doing two different things. My brother, my oldest brother Drew, had a saying he used to say that used to really drive me nuts for like a couple years until I got it. And he got it from one of his mentors, and it was, the truth you believe is the truth you live. Parents in the room, to you directly, if you want to promote church, Jesus, the things that we profess out of this book as priority, you need to live them like they are. And by that example, your children will recognize the truth in what you're saying. But if you treat them as a convenience to only be followed and understood when it works for your schedule, then you will see them follow and understand it as it works for their preference. Sabbath requires purpose. I've never known somebody to accidentally fall into Sabbath. You know, you don't accidentally do nothing all day. Actually, once in a while, college students do. I'll tell you that much. College students and high schoolers, they do, and they're sorry, sort of. But I don't think most of us do nothing all day on purpose, right? Like, I've never accidentally been like, wow, I had the most restful day. It's been a long time since I've done that. Usually it's because Mackenzie and I will talk about it, and we're like, what's your day off? I'm like, Tuesday. She's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, nothing. I'm going to read. Might go outside. Don't plan on keeping my phone with me. Like, that's restful for me. And it's because I've tried to put purpose behind it. Sabbath's intentional and it's proactive. It becomes a discipline. It's not an add-on that we get to do if we just kind of get to it. It's something you have to be proactive and put into your schedule. If you can't, you cannot figure out how to do that, and you cannot nail down a time, you're going to continuously answer the question of how you doing with, I'm tired, I'm busy, feeling beat up. And I know it's hard, but what's the priority you're putting in your life? What's the priority you're putting in your family? Jesus is Lord of the harvest as he's Lord of the Sabbath. I think sometimes we look at productivity as if I stop being productive, then productivity ceases. Jesus ceased the creation on the seventh day, but that didn't stop the Creator. He may have rested, but that didn't stop him. The Lord of the harvest is the Lord of the Sabbath. And by honoring him in one and omitting the other, we short sell our worship. Just because it's more comfortable to do what society's doing doesn't mean it's right. I want to close with putting this challenge forward. How do we look at Sabbath as spending time resting in God as a priority in our life? How do we make corporate worship, where in Hebrews it says, do not stop meeting together and rejoicing in my name, and finding one another and teaching one another and talking about the scriptures in goodness and in joy? That's part of Sabbath. The early Christian church didn't take Sabbath out. They didn't. They chose to honor it on what we consider Sunday because that was the day the Lord had risen, and they called it the Lord's Day. They didn't remove Sabbath from their lifestyle. They didn't remove the original intent to rest with the Lord. They moved the way it fit in their routine. If you've removed Sabbath, if you've removed rest, if you've removed a time to sit as a family or as a couple, to reflect on what God's done for you and made it a celebration, I challenge you to find a way to do it. And I think your family as a whole will be better because you're trusting God with the productivity. You're trusting God more, and you're truly, I believe, following in the footsteps of what he's laid out for us as a healthy way to live. There's a lot we can do 24/6, but I think if we leave 24/7, we're short selling the joy and the freedom that God wants to give us. Will you guys pray with me? God, thank you for your generosity in what you've given us. Thank you that Lord, you have made us in such a way that we can reflect on your goodness and recognize that you haven't set an impossible precedent. God, thank you that your Son has come to make it possible to be in relationship with you. And God, I pray that we are bold enough as a church and bold enough as people to make the changes we need to make our lives reflect your Son's life. God, that we do good things, that we remember the good things you've done, and that as we move forward, we keep those at the forefront of our mind, that we may walk in step with the Spirit. God, let your way guide us, be a lamp unto our feet, that we may be the salt of the earth, that we can truly, truly, truly make this place more like your kingdom. God, we love you, we praise you, and we thank you. In Jesus' name. Amen.